No one could explain why Helena West chose that house. Maybe it was the price, far too low to be normal. Maybe it was the desperate need to start over after losing her parents in an accident. Or maybe the house chose her. It was an old, isolated construction, surrounded by twisted trees that seemed to whisper when the wind passed through them. The sign at the entrance, worn and half destroyed, left only a fragment still readable. Noke. The neighbors avoided even looking toward that dirt road. The few people still living in the area crossed their arms, made subtle hand signs, and muttered, "You don't step into a place where the disappeared call." Helena ignored all of it. The mistake began with her very first step inside. The door creaked as if waking from a deep sleep. The air inside was heavy, humid, almost warm, like something was breathing within the walls. Helena heard footsteps, dragging, slow, but the house was empty. During the first nights, it was only noise, knocks on the walls, objects shifting on their own, whispers coming from dark corners. Then came the voices. "Helena, return to the forest. You belong to us." She tried to ignore them, but the voices grew closer every night. The smell of wet soil would invade her room, and her dreams were always the same. A woman covered in blood, wearing an old-fashioned dress, holding a torch. Trying to stay calm, Helena bought equipment and decided to record everything. Maybe it was all in her mind. Maybe she could prove she wasn't losing her sanity. Every night she captured the sound of bones breaking outside, steps coming from the attic, even though the attic had been sealed for decades, chants in a forgotten language, whispers saying, "The siege begins when the moon bleeds." When reviewing the footage, Helena noticed something terrifying. The voices weren't coming from inside the house, they were coming from behind her, and each video showed shadows that hadn't been there before. Figures standing in corners, watching still, faceless. In the third week, Helena woke to the sound of footsteps outside, but they weren't human, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, marching. When she looked through the window, she saw them, burned bodies, people without jaws, children with black eyes, men with open wounds as if their skin had been peeled off, all walking toward the house like soldiers obeying an ancient call. At the center of them, holding a spear made of bones, stood the butcher. A primal terror overtook Helena, freezing her completely. She could only listen to what the leader whispered. "Blood always returns to its place of origin, and you have returned to us." At midnight, the moon turned a deep, violent red that illuminated only the house. Nothing else. The forest around it disappeared, swallowed entirely by darkness. The creatures began surrounding the house, violent pounding, screams, crying, laughter. Helena locked herself in the bedroom and trembled, but the door began to open, slowly, on its own. A child appeared in the doorway, pale, with her throat slit open, dried blood down her chest. "They're coming in. You shouldn't have returned." The girl smiled. The sound of the smile, a crack of cartilage, made Helena vomit in fear. Running without thinking, Helena rushed to the attic, the one sealed decades ago. But now, it was open. There were marks on the walls, names, dates, claw scratches, blood. Faces carved into the wood as if someone had tried to dig out with their teeth. In the center of the attic, an old chair covered in broken chains, and a camera. When Helena pressed play, the video showed a woman identical to her, but older, thinner, with deep, hollow eyes. You shouldn't have come. They never let the next one escape. Now it's your turn." The woman looked straight into the camera, straight at Helena, straight at the reader, and whispered, "She's behind you." The attic door slammed shut by itself. The lights went out. The whispers grew, louder, turning into screams. "Blood! Blood! Blood!" Helena felt cold hands grip her ankles, then her legs, her arms. Something breathed against her neck, something warm, something hungry. And then, absolute silence. The camera kept recording for 6 more hours, showing only the empty attic. But every now and then, a shadow crossed the frame, Helena's silhouette, or something wearing her body. The house is still there, and they say that when the moon turns red again, you can hear knocking inside the walls, and new recordings appear on the abandoned camera in the attic. No one reaches the end of this story without feeling something watching behind them. Right now, 2 weeks after Helena's disappearance, the police declared the case without evidence, as they always did whenever someone set foot on that cursed land. The house was abandoned. Again. But it never stayed empty for long. It started with the residents of the nearby town, ordinary people, folks who had never even seen Helena. All of them had the same dream on the same night. A woman, thin, far too pale, with sunken eyes, stood silently in the doorway of their bedrooms. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But at a certain point in the dream, they all heard. When they woke up, there was dirt on their feet. Red dirt. Dirt from the Roanoke forest. The house didn't wait for visitors. It called visitors. The first to answer was Clara, a paranormal phenomena researcher. She received an anonymous letter with the message, "She's still there, and she's hungry." Clara went, out of curiosity, out of challenge, and because a part of her felt the same call Helena felt. As soon as she entered, she noticed the interior seemed different from the archived photos. It looked bigger, much bigger, as if the hallways had grown on their own, and the house was breathing. The walls expanded and contracted slowly, like living lungs. The ceiling cracked like bones realigning, and the floor vibrated softly, matching the rhythm of a heartbeat beating somewhere below. Clara thought about running, but the door behind her closed and vanished. She turned on her camera and followed the hallway that seemed to stretch further with each step. Every footstep echoed as if she were walking inside a giant organism. At the end, she found a room that did not exist on the house's blueprints. Inside were photos of Helena nailed to the wall with rusted nails, torn fragments of a dress, scratch marks attempting to claw their way out of the floorboards, and a phrase written with something dark. "She didn't die. She changed." The writing shook as if Helena had written it in a hurry before being dragged away. On the recording, Clara whispered, "Helena, are you here?" And the answer came from behind her. Not completely. Clara spun around with the jolt, but saw no one. Only a deformed shadow in the corner, something vaguely human-shaped, but moving as if it had too many joints. And then, a face emerged from the shadow. It was Helena, or what was left of her. Half of her face was normal. The other half seemed sculpted by the house's darkness, as if the house had absorbed her, digested her, and remade her. Helena spoke with 2 voices layered over each other. "You shouldn't have come. She wants you too." Clara stepped back, but the shadow grabbed her ankle, cold, hard, with fingers far too long. Helena pointed to the floor, where cracks pulsed like veins. "She feeds on us, on our pain, on our fears. No one ever really disappears. We become part of her. Clara began to hear voices rising from the cracks, screams, crying, whispers begging for death, others begging not to be forgotten. And then something crawled out of the fissures. Hands. Hundreds. Some human. Others long and gray, like creatures that never possessed faces. The hands tried to grasp Clara but were trapped in the cracks, reaching as far as they could, but never quite touching her. Helena dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Her bones cracked. Folds appeared where none should exist. Ribs pushed through her skin and retracted again, as if the house was reshaping her again and again, trying to find the perfect form. She looked at Clara with entirely black eyes. She wants a successor, before the moon bleeds again. Clara tried to run, but Helena appeared in front of her in an instant, teleported by the house itself. And with a monstrous, distorted voice, she screamed, "Don't run! No one runs!" The house shook, the walls split open into mouths, the wood twisted into spikes, and from the floor below, footsteps began to echo. The lost of Roanoke were coming up the stairs. And then the recording cuts. The camera fell to the floor. The last recorded image. Clara being dragged by her ankles by hands emerging from the living floor. Helena watching, perfectly still, with an impossible smile stretching from ear to ear as her shadow grew behind her, consuming the entire wall. The recording ends with a phrase spoken in many voices at once. "One more for the house." Clara's recording went viral. It shouldn't have. But the police, mystery channels, and curious viewers, everyone saw it, and everyone thought it was fake, just another cheap paranormal hoax. Until everyone involved in the case disappeared during the same week. The town panicked, and the house fully awakened. It was the night of the full moon when the residents heard a sound coming from the forest, not wind, not an animal. It was the sound of flesh tearing open, slow, wet, melancholy. When the moon turned red, a bloody glow illuminated only the land around the house. The rest of the world fell into a total, thick, almost liquid darkness. And for the first time in centuries, the house opened its eyes. Two perfect, round black holes formed on the facade. Each window trembled like heavy eyelids waking up. The door opened on its own, like a mouth waiting for the next sacrifice. The lost of Roanoke appeared once more, but this time they weren't whole. Some were missing arms with shadows pulsing in their place, as if the house were trying to rebuild them using darkness. Others had their jaws bound by roots, forced into eternal silence. And behind them, Helena, completely consumed, half human, half house. Her skin now had the texture of ancient wood, filled with living cracks that pulsed like veins. Her eyes were hollow, but inside them, something was moving, as if tiny faces were trying to escape. She carried a torch made from charred bones, just like the original butcher. And she spoke with a voice that came from the entire house, echoing like hundreds of people murmuring at once. "The moon has bled again, and tonight she feeds." Then Ethan, Clara's brother, arrived to find answers. But he didn't find silence. The moment he stepped onto the property, he felt the ground vibrating. Not like earth, like a giant backbone. The house seemed to be watching him. "Clara?" he called out. The answer came from every window at the same time. "Clara doesn't exist anymore." And the door opened. Ethan entered. Inside, the house was alive, literally. The walls pulsed, swelling and sinking as if breathing. The floor was warm, and every step made wet sounds like stepping on raw flesh. The lamps flickered, though there were no wires. And above all, there were pulses, heartbeats, rhythms, coming from the stairs, the walls, the ceiling, from everywhere. And then Ethan saw something that shattered his mind. A wall opened like a deep cut, and several human eyes appeared inside it. They opened slowly, one by one, forming a whole row watching him. Worse still, a mouth appeared beneath the eyes, a huge one with irregular teeth, moving on its own. And it spoke with a child's voice. "You're too late, Ethan. She's already in the foundation." Following what seemed to be Clara's voice, Ethan descended to the basement. The air was so heavy it felt like thick liquid filling his lungs. The walls dripped something dark and warm, and in the center of the room was a hole, a deep pulsing pit, like a heart buried in the earth. Then, inside the darkness, Ethan heard, "Bro, come down. I'm here. I need." But the voice had two tones, Clara's, and another, deep, scratchy, hungry. He descended. Each step felt softer, as if he were stepping on something alive. And when he reached the bottom, he found her, or what remained of her. Clara was fused into the wall, absorbed by it. The lower half of her body vanished into the pulsating wood. Her arms were stretched, elongated, pinned as if being pulled forever. Her head tilted, her mouth sewn shut by roots of the house. But the eyes, they were hers, full of pain, full of awareness. And inside the eyes, Ethan saw shadows moving, as if small creatures crawled behind the iris. She tried to speak. The roots sewing her mouth twitched, trying to open, but couldn't. So the house spoke for her. She asked to stay. Now she's part of the structure. Ethan screamed, desperate. That was exactly what the house wanted. His fear pulsed through the air, fed the wood, strengthened the walls. Helena appeared behind him, smiling with a broken, impossible grin. "The moon bleeds, Ethan, and you came to offer the next feast." He ran, but there was nowhere to go. The stairs disappeared, the ceiling closed, the walls moved, tightening, breathing, sweating, and everything went dark. The house trembled in pleasure. The walls pulsed violently, windows burst open, the red moon lit the roof. The lost of Roanoke watched in silence, as if witnessing a sacred ritual. And then, a scream came from inside the house, a long scream, deep, agonizing, the kind of scream that doesn't sound human, but like someone being rewritten from the inside. When it ended, Helena raised the bone torch and whispered, "One more incorporated, one more brick, one more member of the house," and the moon returned to normal. But the house kept smiling. Yes, the house smiled.